Hey, everybody. Just give me a minute to get set up.
Good morning.
Hey, John. All right. Gosh, my computer's doing some really weird stuff.
Good morning.
Hey, Clemens. All right. Ahmed, are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Excellent. You can't hide anymore. That's great. All right.
Excuses.
Tommy.
Yo.
Yo. How are you there?
Hello.
Hello. And everybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. Oh, thank you, Clemens, for the PR.
Just for you, Doug.
I know. I appreciate that. I do like to feel special. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Daniel.
Hello.
I have a couple of slides. Should I put the link in the meeting notes?
Sure. I can upload them later for you if you want to.
Yeah.
Hey, Christoph.
Hey, Doc.
But I assume you'll be presenting at the same time today, Ahmed, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hey, Scott.
Doug.
Hey, Remy, welcome back. How's the little one?
Hey, great. A
Great.
bit more work with too.
Excellent. All right, just one more minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hold on a second here. All right. Let's see if I missed anybody. Oh, geez. Okay, here we go. Okay, anything from the community people want to bring up? That's not on the agenda. Okay. We technically have a discovery or not call this week. If we can, I'd like to have a very short one there just to see how we are in terms of getting some other endpoints up. Just to do some little bit of nagging. KubeCon North America. Nothing there other than Scott, you're still planning on representing us, right?
Yes, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Can't remember if I did this or not. I'll double check. I thought maybe I signed us up, but maybe I didn't. I'll double check and make sure we sign up for the booth 145-minute session. Ryan actually reached out to me. He volunteered to represent us in KubeCon China. So I sent in the request today with his information. So we're all set there. So I don't need that anymore. Can like that. All right. Timur is not on the call, so nothing from him. All right. Ahmed, you are up relative to the SQL stuff. I assume you want me to stop sharing, right? So you could share.
Yes.
Here you go.
Let me see. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. Let me make that. So now it's full screen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Cool. So basically, I'm gonna try and introduce also my version of the understanding of Cloud Event SQL and the context where it was brought up from. And one of the things that I think the working group will also need to consider is there are probably different alignments about or different ideas about the reasons behind the SQL expression language and where it needs to evolve to. So if there are differences between our understanding there, I think this is a good opportunity for us to align around them. So I'm not going to dive into the Cloud Event expression language deeply. I'll just share the highlights of that expression language, which is basically, it allows you to do matching on Cloud Event attributes against a small number of clauses that are similar to what you see in SQL where clauses. And the reason it was brought up is coming specifically some context coming from Knative project, where we do have the concept of filters within objects in cloud in Knative eventing. And we were looking for more advanced capabilities of doing cloud event filtering. Different people had different ideas. There are already some implementations and expression languages out there, but there was no basically clear winner in that area for different reasons, whether good tools that are not very vendor neutral or don't have a wide adoption or a vast number of implementation, or too big of a language for the use cases of cloud event attributes, adding more risk while implementing it. So this is where the cloud event expression SQL came from. And basically, it started with the same or a correlated cloud event type system. So the same string, integer, and Boolean coming there. It added a set for being used in clauses like in set, and the rest of the like a URI types and stuff are being considered as strings. And to make it simple, the assumption is that all cloud event attributes and extensions are addressable from the expression itself. So when you say ID or type, you are addressing the attributes of a valid cloud event that is giving as an input to the expression language, to the engine, basically. And it added also for being more powerful than just the basic expression language, the concept of functions, with this defining in the spec a set of built-in functions that are to be expected available from matching implementations or from compatible implementations. You feel free to stop me anytime for questions. These are some examples that you will see in the spec, and you can see very obviously that they are very similar to SQL where clauses. Some of them can also be using some of the functions like substring or arithmetic functions having absolute or whatever different functions out there. And in a way to try to summarize its current implementation, it is being provided in the subscription API as one of the dialects. So as maybe some of you already know, in the subscriptions APIs, there is filters field, and this is a set of filtered dialects, and SQL is one of the dialects there that and the implementation right now exists in 2 different states and in 2 different SDKs. In SDK Go, there is a working implementation, but I believe it needs more optimization. While the SDK Java seems that it had more love in the optimization and implementation of the SQL expression language. Also, there is a test kit, a test suite kit that is in the spec repo. So both implementations in Go and Java pass the test suite kit. And as an actual usage of that in eventing, there is an experimental feature. It's not clear yet whether it will be graduated or not. However, it's an experimental feature to adapt the filters field from the subscriptions API to adopt it in the trigger object that exists there, including the SQL dialects, which is what we're talking about here today. I am basically trying to get ramped into driving the topic of the cloud event SQL from Francesco, who used to drive and own this topic. So this is more or less my current understanding of what needs to be done next. I think at least for our users, when cloud event SQL expression language topic is brought up, it is not clear what is the buy-in of the community behind that. It is still one of the controversial topics, I would say. So I think we need to understand more the community adoption, or maybe if somebody, or if there are big concerns that needs to be addressed early on for us to achieve a wide adoption of this, then this is the time to do that. And from an SDK perspective, there is definitely a big lack in documentations. There are there is Java docs in the Java SDK, and a very basic number of tutorials. So definitely increasing the documentation is going to be much needed. and also unifying the implementation and adoption of, across the different SDKs. I believe if this is going to be, I'm not sure what is the process for the working group, if this made it to a version of the specs. Is there eventually going to be adopted across all or not? But one of the strong reasons behind actually coming up with this expression language is to have it ready and implemented across a various number of languages for different implementations of event processing systems, basically. And I think it will increase. The topic is, as you probably know, is very controversial because you're introducing a way for users to manipulate events within your middleware and to filter events within your middleware. And then here comes concerns about security and performance impact, et cetera. So I think having a battle-tested implementation of that expression language, of that spec, is going to also increase the chances of this being widely adopted. And if there are other aspects about what we can do next, as I said, I am still getting involved recently into this, so all of the context is not really in my mind right now.
I have two additional thoughts, I would say, if I may. So good presentation, thank you. There are some like how we got there is a little bit more. There's a there's a bit more to that story. The original proposal was to build a completely idiosyncratic language for filters in cloud events. We then landed on SQL, and that is kind of in the first paragraph of the introduction. It refers to JMS. The nice effect of what we did here is that you can filter cloud events if you run them through a JMS broker, and that JMS broker is using MQP. It turns out that you can use subscriptions in SQL where, not in all details, but in simple expressions, a JMS SQL expression, the filter, is a CE SQL expression. And that is no accident, because the template for this SQL expression language is actually the MQP SQL expression spec, which directly borrows from the JMS SQL expression spec. The reason why the MQP SQL expression spec is a clean room implementation that achieves the same thing as JMS is that JMS is under an Oracle license, and that is a problem. And so therefore we made a clean room definition without looking at the JMS implementation, but achieving the same thing in MQP. And so Slinky then basically looked at that and also borrowed quite a bit of that language, which is okay. So that's kind of how we got here. And it will be useful to kind of still keep in mind that there is this lineage, and also kind of keep in mind what the subset is that is compatible, so that you can really go and write. We won't change the existing JMS servers, right? But they will all play a big role in these scenarios. And if you look at ActiveMQ, for instance, ActiveMQ, you can go and set JMS filter expressions also over pure MQP. So you don't need to use the JMS SDK. The same is true, for instance, for Service Bus in Azure. So that's one aspect of this. So these filters are actually more universal than one might think, because they are already pretty widely implemented in a ton of servers, because we chose that lineage. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is, and that's a thought I would like to introduce as new but relevant, There are by now various SQL languages for complex event processing. Each of them kind of having its own little warts, but they're all kind of inspired by SQL, and they kind of stick mostly with the general notion of the SQL language, as we do here. And most of them have a notion of a where clause. So they typically have a way to go produce events. So they kind of select messages and produce, or select fields and then turn them into a projection. And they do this using joins of multiple inputs often, but ultimately there's always a where clause which kind of filters down the input stream. And that's exactly what we have here. So we have a filter language which also is suitable as a part of these kind of filter languages, or the filter aspect of these aggregation engines, where probably the aggregates, that's, it's hard for them to all probably agree with, because that's where the features are. But having these various kinds of event stream engines kind of pick the same filter language, or be compatible at least with the flavor that we bring for cloud events, I think is an interesting goal. So I think the alignment with JMS is interesting, but there are evolution reasons and also license reasons for not that to be exactly the same thing. But keeping in mind that there's effectively a compatible subset in this language will be interesting. And I think then from a perspective like looking forward, offering effectively again a subset of a SQL language, which allows you to take a stream of cloud events and then filter down that stream of cloud events, so that you can then have a filtered stream that can then go into an aggregation expression, I think is also useful. Because there has not been a lot of standardization around those languages, and the SQL people are kind of looking at it. But I think with what we're doing here, we're approaching at least half of a part of that problem. That's my additional thought.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, cool. In that case, Ahmed, thank you very much for the presentation. Let me go back to sharing. Yeah, so if you can send me the link to, where is it? Send me a link to the presentation, I'll upload it for you. So we can share that. All right, cool, moving forward then. Before we jump into PRs and stuff, any other topics people want to add to the agenda? All righty then, Clemens, you opened up one with a ZZ. So I think this is just update the master branch with the changes you made from last time, right? Exact same changes?
That it is the same change, just merged into the different branch.
Yep. Okay. Any objection then to approving that one? All right. Thank you, Clemens. All right. Daniel, I don't know if we can resolve this one today because I think you and John still have some issues to discuss, but I thought it might be good if you can at least bring people up to speed in terms of the changes that you made, because you made some structural changes, which I think are really good in terms of adding clarity. I wanted to give you a chance to talk to those.
Yeah, so let's see, I guess as I mentioned last time, I split this data handling session into two sections to clarify the serialization versus deserialization process. And within each of those subsections, there are basically, I enumerated three cases. The binary case, where you're using database 64, the non-binary but JSON case, which is kind of this, which is the whole special case that we're trying to address in JSON formats, and then the other case, the non-binary non-JSON. So you're doing text XML or whether any other content type. So each of these sections is split up into those three cases. You know, how to handle that. I think that should, you know, in terms of structurally, that should be, I think that should explain what's going on. I'm not sure what else you want to say. I think there are two existing or two open issues right now that are being discussed. So the first one is actually, if you scroll back up just a bit, the first one is that one where I'm kind of coining this term JSON oriented and defining it in terms of certain forms of the content type, star/JSON or star/star plus JSON. So JSON subtype or JSON format of the subtype, as trying to identify exactly when this special JSON format behavior kicks in. I don't like trying to come up with new terminology and defining it. I would like to be able to cite something, but I am not aware of any RFC or anything that talks about JSON media types. I'm hoping that this might exist someplace, or that anyone else has kind of comments on how to further clarify this case, because this seems to be the main issue that we're trying to address here. How do you identify this space, the cases when this special JSON behavior kicks in? So that's the one question. The other one is this question that John Skeet brought up, which has to do with the fact that in JSON formats, it allows data to be not a string, allows it to be any other JSON types, objects, arrays, true, false, null, and anything else, which is different from your normal HTTP protocol, for example, where content is always a string or a byte array. So in my mind, it only makes sense for data to be one of these other JSON types if the content type is also JSON. If you're interpreting this as JSON, otherwise, if it's text HTML or image JPEG or anything else, then it should, data should not be JSON, because it doesn't make, how do you interpret a JSON object as text HTML? But John wanted to clarify that a little bit, and or wanted to open up the possibility that, well, maybe there are other cases where you might allow data to be not a string, a JSON object. Maybe if it's protobuf, the type is protobuf, then there's a natural mapping from JSON to protobuf, for example. And so that's this question: do we allow that flexibility? Which in my mind is opens up a lot of ambiguity, and I don't want to go there, but I think it's still a valid question.
I think what you said is that it's only JSON if it's JSON, if it's declared as such. I think that's right. If the event is JSON, I think the story, the complication that we have is that so data can have effectively two modes in general. And that is either it is the same encoding as the encoding of the surrounding event. And so the event is encoded as protobuf, and then the data is also protobuf, then everything is protobuf. And the same is true for JSON or Avro or whatever. And then the other mode is that it deviates.
Yes.
And so if it's binary, so for JSON, we kind of made this special data base64 escape hatch, because there we have no good way of expressing that in JSON. That it is binary, and so therefore obviously different. But then for all the cases where the data comes in as text, then you carry HTML, then there's this ambiguity of whether that text is really, whether that string is that a JSON expression or is that a string expression. But I think if you leave out the data content type completely, then it's implied that it just follows whatever the rules are of the encoding of the event. And then if you specify the data content type, then it must be very clearly JSON for you to interpret that as JSON. And if not, then it must be a string. Must be a string.
So let's take a look at this example, though. Right, it's a YAML with this. Does it map to this, or does it map to this?
It maps to. It's that case is really interesting, because what does that \n do?
I don't know. I kind of assumed it mapped to this, to be honest.
There's an implied. So this is really interesting case, because it is not valid YAML. So this \n, because the \n thing is there is some translation that's being assumed here that is not true when you simply take that string and turn that into YAML. Right? That \n something does something to that \n thing, but that's a different encoding story. There is now an implied assumption that there's something that happens in the C language or in the Go language or in some other language that interprets that \n into a character return.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's probably that's probably my fault then. Assume that those are actual carriage returns. So,
but they need to be expressible. So and so then you're in. So if you want to go and put YAML in here, and you want to put that into the data field, then that's not expressible simply as a string in this case, but you really have to do this as application YAML, charset UTF-8, and you need to put data base64, and you need to go to take the UTF encoded binary in there. Because the IO feeds are not expressible in that way.
So what you're saying is that if the data content type is not JSON, if it's any other data content type, text plain, text HTML, application YAML, then the data must always be binary. It must always use data base64.
If you're trying to do a stunt like this, yes, because there's no. Because the \n thing is you need to have a way to go and translate that into what you want, and it's not the literal string.
Apologies about the \n.
It's beautiful that you did that. It's great that
assume that this is just text plain, and there's no \n. It's just data equals 1, 2, 3 in a string.
What that means is that the data now literally the data contains string data. I think that's something we can do, where we can say if it's not JSON, right, but the data field contains a string, then we'll just take the string and we just use it as a string. That's something that's okay. The data field is a variant, effectively. I have to run, unfortunately.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I have to leave you hanging in the middle of this discussion, but I really have to go.
That's okay. Thank you, Clemens.
Sorry.
So, but Daniel, I think you're suggesting that, I think you were suggesting what Clemens was kind of touching on there at the end, which is if you can encode it all as a string, then just do this, right?
Yeah, so I think in this case, you could just say hello in data. I don't think YAML requires that you have the extra dashes in the syntax.
Right.
So if we were to do that, if I were to just edit this and say, okay, data equals quote double quote hello double quote, does that change this? Does that change the answer here, or does that change people's opinion about this? The point being that there is a mapping, there's a natural mapping between YAML and JSON. So do you parse the data string as a YAML document? Or do you turn it directly into a YAML, into just a YAML string type?
So my interpretation of what you have here is people should take whatever data is, what is the string value? So remove the quotes, take those bytes and assume that it is raw YAML.
Assume it is a YAML document that you must parse.
Yes, it is a YAML document, as if I was just reading it from standard in. Yes.
Yes, that's what I would expect.
Yeah.
So that kind of feeds into my argument that then it is probably not a good idea then to allow data to be the type of this data to be now a JSON object rather than a string, because that reintroduces this ambiguity so if data was not a string but was open curly brace, some JSON object,
Yeah, I'm trying to find an example. I thought you had something in here. Nope, you don't have one. Darn. Okay.
Anyway, the entire point of this PR is to deal with that ambiguity. When in cases where you allow the data to be some arbitrary JSON value type, array, object, number, then how do you interpret it if it's a string?
Yeah.
And the whole point of this this whole exercise is, so if we've already established that if the data content type is JSON, if it's application JSON, then we do allow data to be an object, and so we must then deal with this ambiguity. So there's all this text now on how to on what the cases are and how do you deal with that. Now if we also allow application YAML to for data to be an object, if the data content type is application YAML, now we also have to deal with ambiguity for that case. I don't want to do that. I want to scope this whole ambiguity to just content type as JSON.
Yeah, if this was a real full-blown object, I don't know what it would mean to be YAML. I have no idea how to interpret that. But I'm sorry, Scott, I just realized your hand's up.
Hey, howdy. So I was thinking about this in the perspective of like what the Go SDK is doing. If I see something like application YAML, what I assume is that data is a JSON encoded string. And once you JSON de-encode that string, then you can pass the remaining buffer to a YAML unmarshaller. That's always been my assumption. So
Right.
the data becomes a quoted string unless the case is it's a JSON application JSON, then the thing can be any kind of valid JSON object, including a JSON string.
Correct. Now, the question is, what if this, instead of being a string, was a curly brace object? What
Then that would fail because
For-
the special case is that application JSON means that data can be something, and anything else, data has to be a JSON encoded string.
Right. I think that's what Daniel's suggesting. Yep.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
agree with that. Yeah. So if the case is like, if the question is, can data be 42 with application YAML, that I think that's an invalid cloud event because you can't assume how to decode data.
Right. So maybe everybody who wants to chime in, join in the chat here, because I think John was suggesting something slightly different, I think. So, okay, Daniel, were there other aspects of this you wanted to talk to? I think those are the only conversation pointers.
Yeah, I think those are the main pointers that are still open. I just pushed another commit an hour or a little over an hour ago with where I addressed a bunch of your comments, Doug. So I think those are addressed. Let me know if you believe otherwise.
Okay. All right. Any questions at this time? 'Cause I think we need to take it a little offline, at least for John, because I know he's on vacation today, so he's probably going to want to chime in again before we approve it. But any questions for Daniel? Okay. In that case, Daniel, thank you again for your effort on this one. I know it's kind of a pain, but it's a good thing you're doing there. Okay. Next on the agenda. I actually presented this last week. I decided to remove the topic of, what was it? What to do with unknown query parameters. I pulled that out into a separate PR because I think all the changes I made here were okay with everybody. I made epoch a unsigned 32-bit integer, fixed a typo here, A versus E, and I decided to keep in the text here that talked about how if a service is no longer visible in the query, if you're doing a unfiltered query, then you can assume it's been deleted. But a filtered query, you can't know whether it's been deleted or just removed from the query because some attributes changed. I thought that might be still useful. I actually don't think there's anything normative in here. It was just guidance more than anything else, but I thought that might still be useful, separate from the whole query discussion, query parameter discussion. Any questions or concerns about this? Okay, any objection to approving? Okay, and I will wait until Ryan gets back to really talk about the other one that I opened up because I know he had some strong opinions on that. Unfortunately, Clemens dropped. Let me just see if there's anything here we can actually discuss or whether it's too big. Yeah, tell you what, let's wait for him to get back to him for him to talk about his PR. It's rather large. In that case, though, Eric, are you in a position that you can talk? 'Cause I know you've been on vacation or traveling a bit. You in a spot where you can actually talk to your PR?
Yeah, I'm back home and on a stable connection again.
Cool.
So this PR is designed to add a notion of history, and the core way that it does this by saying that the discovery service itself must be discoverable or published as a service within the discovery service. And particularly what that service will, the events that service will produce will be events that describe every update to the service. So each of the administrative interfaces just say, hey, a post or a delete was provided to this endpoint and with this body. And here is the response. So that's if you dig onto 905 through 908, that's the operation, post or delete, the path, and then the request and the response. And given that any downstream discovery endpoint should be able to do whatever it likes. I attempt to make that kind of clear. There's two kind of callouts. Actually, if you slide down 916, there's the second piece, which is a get of /changes, and this endpoint I added to allow for querying for the historical updates. So the events that will be produced by the discovery endpoint, those will be, unless we change, unless there's a mechanism for doing something a little more advanced here, I'll get into that. Those are going to be from the time of subscription onward. And this would allow you to query for any events that occurred prior to the point of subscription, if this is an existing discovery endpoint. Now, if rather than having this /changes, we were able to, at subscription time, supply a how far back in history do I want this subscription to start delivery from, that would make this go away, which I think that would be a cleaner, better way to do it. But that's fairly opinionated, and I wrote some text to try and help stimulate that conversation. But going up to the original, there's a delete onto collect. This is just a base problem. A delete onto collections doesn't play well with caching in HTTP. And that's the first comment I made in there. So anyway, that's a big overview, but that's what this is about.
Okay. Any questions for Eric? Any thoughts on good or bad feature? Okay, I just have one question. Can you elaborate a little on the use case for the changes stuff? I definitely get the idea of being notified when something does change. And the eventing side of thing, that makes perfect sense to me. And I'm not saying I don't like the idea of the changes, because I think it's interesting to get the historical stuff, but I'm kind of curious in terms of just understanding what kind of use cases you have in mind where someone would need to know how a particular service looked 5 days ago, as opposed to how it looks today.
Probably the easiest way to talk about this is it depends on whether you're taking a materialization mindset or a stream processing mindset. So one way to go about this would be to do something like set up a subscription and then query the API or the service for all the services, or the discovery endpoint for all the services it contains. And then after, kind of copying that into your mirror, processing everything that comes in on the subscription, then and doing that in an idempotent way, then you're going to end up with a mirror, altered however you like to do it. On the other hand, if you want to only process the updates, then this is going to allow you to adopt that model. So you could ask for all changes, or stuff all of those into a queue or some kind of a ordered message log, and then you could do the subscription query again and add anything that maybe was missed. I'm being messy with this, but that would allow you to only process using the logic that you process updates with. So taking this kind of stream perspective from it. And that's why something like being able to, during a subscription, say, I want to, subscribe and start the stream of events from the beginning of history would give you something that's a lot cleaner in interface, and would give you the ability to only process updates rather than having to deal with the materialization at all.
It also saves you from having to calculate those diffs, and you could do like deprecation notices to your user base or something like that if you had the change log.
But wouldn't you get those both through the events?
Well, you could turn them into events.
I guess I'm sorry. I feel like I missed something. Okay. So Eric, I think you were first saying if you want, the eventing side of things is fine, but how do you get to that state where you're prepared to handle just the changes, meaning just the events? And you were saying you can use get/changes to get to that point, but couldn't you get to that point by just getting the entire discovery endpoint? Because getting the entire discovery endpoint and then subscribing for all changes since then puts you in sync in a position where you can just process changes at that point, right? You don't need the history to make that happen, do you?
I think the benefit of having the history, if you want to do that stream processing, is that you don't have to keep the state in whatever service is consuming that stream. So you don't need to know what you had before and had seen before, because the changes endpoint gives you some statelessness that you could do some more interesting things if you know the deltas between each update of the catalog. And maybe Eric can speak better to what I'm saying, if that's even the intended change.
I think you said it excellently. I mean, at end of day, the materialization is kind of the condensation of all the events that happened to change and create that state of the materialization. And sometimes the whole series of events can be more informative. This isn't really a hyper relevant case for that. Something like this user is adding an item to their shopping cart, removing it, adding it, removing it, adding it. Well, if all you have is the materialization, that thing is in their shopping cart, then you have a very different picture than they were very indecisive about whether they wanted this item or not, right? Which a data scientist could analyze by having the events as opposed to just the materialization. Now, having all the changes in this case is going to give you something like, here's the history of that service. Here's how it has changed and evolved over time, so that you could say, provide historical query over services or something like that, rather than just here's the latest, greatest version.
Yeah, and I think I understand that. I think what I'm struggling with is trying to understand why someone would need to do that analysis, because I kind of view the discovery endpoint as just, hey, it's like a registry, right? And I'm trying to understand why someone would need to know the how things have changed historically over time, to know that, for example, a service came and went a lot, right? It's interesting, sure, but what would someone actually really do with that information, as opposed to just all they really care about is whether it's there now? That's the use case thing that I'm missing.
Sure. So let's say that the use case is that someone has been recording the events in a particular from a particular source for a long time, and they have the whole history, and in that history there's multiple versions of this thing, and the discovery endpoint has published the information on how to understand each of those versions across time. And so you want the historical query across the schemas and other descriptions in order to properly process.
Interesting. Okay, that helps. Thank you. I'm wondering if at some point, I don't know if I haven't read your PR yet, but I'm wondering if you don't have that in here in terms of the why part of it, that might be useful to put in a primer to be able to understand how we intended this to be used and for what purposes.
That makes sense. It's missing, and I could add that.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Any questions for Eric? I assume people need time to review it. I know it's been there. I think it was actually there last week, but I personally would like more time, if that's okay. You're not in a hurry, are you, Eric?
Not at all.
Okay, I didn't think so. Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Okay, so please take your time, or please look it over. I mean, because if there are no concerns with this, then I don't see any reason not to merge it next week unless someone has an objection. So, okay, cool. Thank you, Eric. Okay, let's do this one just quickly. What I'd like to, I started this discussion last week about a very small set of changes, but rather important ones. Basically, it's this section right here, what to do if a discovery endpoint gets query parameters that it does not understand. My initial starting position on this was it should reject the request, because the way we currently have things designed is pretty much query parameters equal filtering mechanism. And you don't know as a client whether what you got back is because the server ignored your query parameter or because it actually took that filter criteria into account and you got back nothing because nothing matched it, or whatnot. Basically, there's this huge ambiguity there, and I didn't want that ambiguity there. And I know Ryan has some concern about that. He mentioned that he was afraid that was a little too strict. But I'd like to hear from other folks, not because I disagree with Ryan, even though I do. It's just, I'd like to hear what other people's perspectives are, because I'd like to understand how we can address that ambiguity problem if we don't reject requests with unknown query parameters. I mean, how do other people see that being handled in other situations? So Scott, your hand's up.
So at first pass, I was going to agree with you, but I think, so imagine the case of it's an OR statement, and I want to filter events that have the 7 ORs. And in that case, the particular consumer won't have that filter. It won't support that filter attribute.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we're talking about, or is it something different?
Yeah, well, yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure OR is the best example, but it could be, yeah.
Like I want to filter on it has a subject or it has these extension fields.
Yes.
And
yes.
Potentially that endpoint doesn't have that, but I want to generically register that I would like to be able to filter on those specific things.
Yes.
So that's my counter argument to why this is a bad idea.
Well, wait,
Also,
I'm sorry. Wait, if you want to filter on, either, you want to do an OR.
I want to do an OR.
Right, but how, if the server doesn't understand half of the OR, are you okay with it just ignoring that?
I think I am, because it's an OR, but that means that the service has to understand some semantics of the filter that I'm trying to use.
Sure, but if it ignores half of your OR and you get back a set, and so you wanted all events that are of type foo and have a subject of bar, right? Or a subject of bar, okay?
Or special extension bypass.
Right. Right. Okay. Now, if it doesn't understand anything but type, and you get back an empty set, are you going to assume that nothing matched any of those 3 conditions, or are you going to assume that, hey, maybe the server actually has these things, but it actually doesn't support the 2 halves of the 2 of the ORs?
What if instead of a 400 we make it some 200 level? It's like a partial accept, where you actually return back a validation scheme. It's like, I'll accept this. I only understood this part. This is the resulting query that I've set up for you. Although this is in the discovery endpoint, so I'm not really sure what we're. And yeah, okay. But yeah, I'm just not sure what someone would do with the result set that says, "Hey, I'm going to give you part of your data." Who's going to use that, right? That's right. My concern. I'll have to. I'll comment on the PR. Yeah, please do. Yeah, like I said, I don't know what to do with this. I did go into a bit of a ramble mode last night or the other day when I was writing this up, because I think there are other interesting things that come up here. So, for example, the way the spec is written right now. Let me see if I have an example here. Oh, we don't. So the way the spec is written right now, if you want to filter on name, you just say question name equals blah. Okay. That might be a little too awkward, right? We may need to put something in front so we know that this query parameter is actually part of a filter as opposed to something else like pagination,
right? So for example, we may need to say $filter equals name equals blah. It's a little bit more verbose, but at least it's very clear that the query parameter is for filtering, right? Because otherwise, how do you either avoid conflicts with other specs that may want to add their own query parameters, like pagination, right? Because now pagination can never use a query parameter where the name matches one of our attribute names. That's a bit of a problem to me, right? So, like I said, I went into a bit of a ramble mode in that stuff. So take a look, because I talk about all those different things there, and comment in the PR. Okay. Anyway, like I said, we're not going to resolve it today, but please think it over when you get a chance. And that was it in terms of the agenda. Does anybody else have any topics they want to bring up? Oh, wow, we're almost out of time anyway. Okay, in that case, last chance at attendee. Lance, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Ben, are you there? Oh wait, Ben vanished. Brian, are you there? Brian? Okay, Brian may have stepped away. Okay, anybody else I missed? I don't think so. Okay, if you're not interested in Discovery Interop, you are free to leave. Otherwise, please stay on the line. I just want to do a little bit of nagging. Otherwise, everybody else have a good rest of your day. Thanks, everybody. Oh wait, we lost Remy. I was gonna bug Remy if no one else.
No, no, I'm here.
Oh wait, where are you still there? Oh, there you
Yeah.
are. Sorry, I
It's
thought it was
because I don't
alphabetical, and I
speak,
kept looking
you're
at the
not
end.
used.
Yeah. Okay. So Remy, I know you actually either have or had a discovery endpoint up, but in order to make it really easy for people, what I wanted to do is try to get endpoints up there that at least support these 3 gets. And I wrote a test client that I want to start hitting endpoints on. And I admit, I don't remember for sure if I tried to hit your endpoint or not. But I want to do is, if you can bring it back up if it's down, I'd like to hit it and start testing things.
Yeah, it's a good. So to be honest, I was like off for a long time. I stopped coding back on my open source project this month, and like I'm stuck in a unit test right now on another project. But yeah, the gateway is still up, so I think it should work. But don't hesitate to ping me during the week, because I can probably work on it. I planned to work yesterday, but I got stuck in my other unit test. But yeah, like for sure. So the gateway, I just tried it. So the gateway, like the UI is still there. So I guess the service I'll try.
Okay, good. Yeah, look, might be having trouble. Okay, well, I'll try it again later, and I'll ping it through Slack if I'm having issues.
Yeah,
okay,
sure. Let me know. I'm testing.
Okay. Is there anybody else on the call who plans on doing an endpoint? Okay. Okay. In that case, there's no one else I can nag except Remy, so that's fine. Okay. So Ben, you're back.
I'm back.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks. It's good. So I can't remember. This isn't your first time on the call, is it?
It is.
Is it? Okay. Do you want to be associated with a company or not?
Sure. VMware is who I work for.
Oh, never mind. I know about you guys. Okay. Okay. Cool.
Ben may be my replacement.
Ah. Okay. In that case, welcome, Ben.
Thank you. An inferior clone.
An inferior clone. I don't know about that. We'll see. All right. Okay. Any other topics people want to bring up relative to discovery endpoint testing? All right. Not hearing any. I think we are done for the day. All right. Cool. Thank you all, and have a good rest of your day. Talk to you next time.
Yep. Bye. Thanks.
Okay, bye, everybody.